Why invest in post-secondary teaching and the cutting-edge research universities do? How does such work affect your life? Economic growth and social advancement require knowledge and ideas, as well as a rising generation of new citizens to advance society. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, investment in higher education has among the highest payoffs of any investment government can make in improving economic growth. Chris Kelly, Superintendent of Schools in Vancouver, says that research directly helps kids in schools across Canada because the results are the constant improvement of human society. In an increasingly competitive global society, how do the governance and funding of universities impact the knowledge creation that gives societies a lasting competitive advantage and a higher quality of life for their people? I'm Paul Shaker, and this is an Education Matter. Joining me on the program today is Dr. Michael Stevenson, President of Simon Fraser University. Thanks for being on the program today, Michael.
It's a great pleasure, Paul. Nice to be with you.
We want to start off by talking about the plant report. This has been on people's minds quite a bit in the province. It's really quite an extensive discussion of the future of higher education in the province. So I'd like to ask you what your interpretation is of this report.
Well, first of all, just to summarize the context, Jeff Plant was a former cabinet minister in the government of British Columbia. He was commissioned by the Premier of the province to do a thorough investigation of the state of higher education in British Columbia and to make recommendations for its improvement up through 2020. And he conducted, by I think all accounts, a very, very thorough conversation throughout the province, listening to all the stakeholders, as we call them, in higher education. And he came up with a report that, from my point of view, was very impressive. Its essentials were that we have a differentiated and very effective system of higher education in this province, but it needs to be more tightly differentiated. That is to say, the division of labor amongst research universities, amongst teaching institutions, amongst colleges, and needs to be more tightly defined so there's not a kind of a slippage to a common denominator amongst institutions. So that was the first point, that differentiation in the system needed to be tightened up. The second point, I think, was that the role of the research universities and the research university system, UBC, SFU, UVic, UNBC, is absolutely vital to the future of the province, and that in relative terms it was clear that a much stronger emphasis needed to be put on strengthening the research university system in British Columbia. So, I mean, there are a whole host of specific recommendations that he makes, but those two central principles were fundamental in my reading, and I think they're absolutely right.
Well, that sounds familiar to me because I worked in California before I came here, and for about 50 years they've been operating under a master plan that differentiated 3 tiers of universities. And although there's some overlap, like every level does the first 2 years of higher education, there certainly were some restrictions on institutions. Particularly the state colleges couldn't do doctorates, for example, and that inhibited their ability to do research. So I suppose we're not looking for something quite as differentiated as California in this.
Well, I don't know. I think that the Plant probably was. He clearly indicated that he felt the colleges should not be in the business of university degree programming. In some senses, I think the problem is that confusion of mandates very often results in a lack of attention, a lack of investment in skilled trades training, for example, which we know is a crucial area of education in support of a growing economy. I think secondly, he did say, as you suggest, that there ought to be restrictions on regional universities or university colleges transformed into regional universities in terms of the research mandate. Obviously, research is a very expensive proposition on the one hand, and secondly, there's simply a question of scale in terms of how widely distributed that specialized function could be in British Columbia. And thirdly, there's the point that you make, and I think comes to us from California, that there's a large degree of articulation and mobility between institutions, so that students who start in one area of the system, but who either have a taste for or an ability and want to move, can move easily. And British Columbia has the most articulated system in Canada, as a matter of fact. And certainly Plant wanted to reinforce those mobility pathways between institutions. So it's not a denial of opportunity. To the contrary, it underlines the opportunity for the best quality education in a very differentiated system.
Well, I guess that kind of assumes we start out with the notion that there's going to be 4 research universities at a minimum in British Columbia. Do you think that's a safe assumption to make?
Well, I think it is a safe assumption. You know, I don't think British Columbia, after all, vibrant and magnificent a place as it is a relatively small part of the global economy, a relatively small part of the North American economy, a relatively small part even of the Canadian economy. And every time I say economy, I mean population as well, obviously. So the reality is that, you know, a larger system than 4 very good research universities is probably not sensible.
It sounds to me you feel assured there'll be at least 4, however.
Well, I think so, because, you know, I think a Plant might have thought about even differentiating amongst those institutions. There was talk about, because of the kind of economic constraints and the expense of higher education, that one might differentiate, say, have a single pinnacle research institution and other feeder institutions, so you could imagine. Mm-hmm. But I think he came to the conclusion that, in fact, the quality of those research universities is so good. You know, UVic and SFU have dominated the comprehensive rankings of universities. You know and I know, and we share the view that rankings are as much nonsense as they are good information. But nevertheless, by any standards, UVic and SFU are leaders in amongst the comprehensive universities. UBC clearly is one of the dominant universities in Canada. With a full array of professional schools, medical schools and other professional schools. And UNBC is a special purpose research institution in the north of the province with niche programs of a very high quality. So I think Plant took the view, and almost any independent observer would take the view, that in fact these institutions work well together. There are a lot of collaborative platforms developed in this province. They are individually very strong. And that balance of competitive strength and collaborative and cooperative development of platforms for research centered in British Columbia, which would be internationally competitive, was the right balance. And that was Plant's conclusion. It's certainly mine.
Well, there's an in-between pathway that could happen among universities or within a university that we've seen in some states and provinces. And that's an initiative to specialize in certain areas, to put resources, to focus them in certain places, and to cut back in others and maybe serve those other areas only at the undergraduate level. To say that every university doesn't need to do PhDs, for example, in every discipline. Either among the universities or within SFU, do you see any tendencies in this direction?
Well, I do, and I mean, I think the fundamental point that, you know, a certain amount of competitive differentiation is a good thing, that we not duplicate, we not simply bulk up in the same areas. And again, I think it was Plant's conclusion, and it is mine, that if you look at the history of these research institutions, just to concentrate on them for a moment, SFU, for example, doesn't duplicate exactly what UBC does, for very good reason. UBC's first-rate institution, it was the established institution in British Columbia. It would be silly for us simply to duplicate what they do. So our approach has been to innovate, to establish new programs, niche areas, even in the conventional disciplines, which differentiate the opportunity at SFU and make us a more exciting collaborative partner on those collaborative platforms I was talking about. But it is also true that the division of labor with the regional universities, the university colleges, and the colleges ought to prevent or to dissuade them from simply wannabe research institutions doing the same kinds of things.
Do we have in the province a governance situation or setting for higher education that is likely to allow intelligent and thoughtful reforms to be implemented? We don't have a firm central authority. I mean, we operate in a democratic setting, of course, and there's a good deal of independence on the part of the institutions. But ultimately, will the governance setting that oversees higher education allow the needed reforms to take place?
Well, that's a very complicated question. I mean, obviously, we have very elaborate governance arrangements for universities. These are, on the one hand, public institutions dependent for a considerable part of their operation on grants from the provincial government. We'll leave the great importance of the federal government aside for the moment. But fundamentally, they're in provincial jurisdiction, and to a large extent, they depend on grants from the provincial government. As public institutions, therefore, there is a governance oversight or a government oversight on those grants, on the accountability for the purposes for which they're given or transferred to universities as public institutions. But that said, they're not creatures of government, and they're not direct agencies of government. In the whole history of the university as an institution in Western society, it's absolutely critical to understand that the universities are set aside as autonomous from government, beyond the direct interference of government. This is vitally important to the whole role of the university throughout Western history and now world history, I would say. And so they are governed independently by independent boards under statutes set by the provincial government. And this is very important. These are, first of all, government appointees, order in council appointments, so-called, but they are citizens who are appointed and once appointed exercise an independent authority as members of the boards of governors over the universities. And their role is limited because, again, the autonomy of the university is grounded in the special authority of scholars. And so the academic programs, enrollment management, the criteria for admission to universities, these matters are left properly by statute in the hands of the senates of the universities, which are dominated by the academic members of the university. So we have a very complicated kind of three-level system, and within the universities a bicameral system. And I don't want to bore your viewers. It is complicated, but it is necessarily so.
Thank you. When we come back, we'll talk more about the role of universities in society.
For more than 40 years, the Faculty of Education at SFU has been delivering academic programs that are innovative and responsive. Based on the academic research of our professors and the expertise of practicing teachers from your communities, our programs are designed to meet classroom needs. As a community, we're piecing together a successful education experience for students today and in the future.
Welcome back to the program. Michael, earlier in our discussion, we talked about innovations and niche areas that SFU has been successful at, and I thought it would be interesting for us to dig a little bit into this and have our viewers understand some of the special areas that Simon Fraser University has worked in.
I'd be glad to. You know, At the same time, I could go on and on this this subject, because any great university like SFU has a great many areas of specialized strength. But I mentioned, by way of introduction, that as a newer university, SFU was committed to innovation, to not simply replicating what was done already. And that's been true throughout the history of the institution. So, for example, in the arts and social sciences, it's the case that our faculty have produced interdisciplinary programs like the School of Criminology, which is probably the premier institution of its kind in the country. A School of Communications, which is actually an applied science, but includes social scientists as well as applied scientists. Again, a very major institution of its kind in Canada, leader in fact. In the applied sciences, along with Waterloo, we were the first to establish an independent School of Computing Science, when that was, in essence, a new field. In the professional schools, as you know, in your faculty, niches in things like math education or in arts education. In the business school, SFU's business school was the first to establish the executive MBA program. Most recently, we've innovated with new programs in, for example, the School for Interactive Arts and Technology, speaking to the whole development of new media and digital entertainment. In the natural sciences, SFU is specialized really in the material sciences, in, say, physics and chemistry. That is the development of new electronic materials, for which you have to know the underlying physical and chemical properties. And now that's morphing into a specialization in nanotechnology, where we're one of the leading universities in the country and indeed in the world. In the life sciences, a specialization in bioinformatics. You know, not the full range of applied genetics, but especially in bioinformatics, so that, talking of the great provincial platform, Genome BC, which is one of the world's leading centers for applied and basic genetics research, the leaders of that program, Mark O'Mara, for example, and Steve Jones, who's the head of the bioinformatics section there, are both graduates of SFU. So there are a whole host of these specialized niche concentrations of excellence at SFU, as there are at any great university.
Maybe something we haven't made clear by our earlier discussion about the specialized roles of the universities is that any of the universities can go around the province and even outside the province and offer their programs. You mentioned math and arts education, and we're in the Okanagan now offering master's cohorts because there was a demand, and we had programs that we could transport to that area. So I think it shouldn't be forgotten that we're not locked to a place. We also go up to the Yukon and Northwest Territories with our programs, and we have done so for many years.
No, it's a good point.
This is one of the aspects of the innovative spirit of SFU, and I wonder if you have any idea why innovation may be able to take place here more than at some universities. Is there something in the character of the place or the history of the place?
Well, I think, as in the old advertising slogan, you know, Avis had to try harder, and SFU was a new institution up against the might of a very strong, established traditional university. And it needed to set its sights on ways in which it could innovate and enter the field at the highest level. And the only way to do that was to get into new areas that hadn't been tried before.
Well, I hope we can keep that appetite going in the future. I think it's a healthy thing in higher education. Now, you've been president for 8 years. You have 2 more at least to go on under your current term. And you've mentioned some of the things I'm sure you're proud of as you listed these innovative programs, but we want to give you an opportunity to also talk about, in general, exciting things you've seen happen in the university and in post-secondary education in the province, and difficulties that you've experienced during your tenure, even up to and including the present time.
Well, I'm obviously glad to talk about the highlights. I mean, for me, there have been an enormous number of them. I've been very fortunate to be in the province at a time of great energy and activity in higher education. SFU's been certainly a part of that. So I would say the highlights, and I just speak geographically, on this campus, the historic campus of SFU on Burnaby Mountain, Probably the highlight has been the creation of a revolutionary new Faculty of Health Sciences, which is focused not on medical care and the care of the sick, but on health promotion and the prevention of illness, from programs specializing in public and population health, through global health, and through basic sciences in infectious disease and the prevention of chronic and infectious disease. So that's a huge new development for us, a major new faculty, which again, in the tradition of SFU, plays a very distinctive role in terms of pioneering a new type of education that's vital for a basic sector of society, in this case the health sector. So that, I would say, is the highlight here. Downtown Vancouver has seen enormous growth of the SFU footprint. You know, again, it was an enormously innovative move, and I can't take the credit for it. Obviously, it was my predecessors who took the plunge to establish a campus in the heart of downtown Vancouver 25 years ago. And we've expanded from 3 floors in a renovated department store to more than 5 floors in that department store, to the renovation of the bank building opposite as the WAS Center for Dialogue, to the opening of the Siegel Graduate School of Business in another renovated bank building around the corner. And I think the highlight will certainly be the opening next year of the School for Contemporary Arts as a major partner in the redevelopment of the Woodward site. And you know, this is just not a matter of educational highlight. It is, of course, the university's engagement in the redevelopment of the most underprivileged part of Vancouver, the poorest neighborhood in all of Canada. And we have an obligation to work in ways that feed not only our own interests, but serve society in that way of creating an energy animating the development of a very underdeveloped area of the city. And thirdly, I would say, in the same vein, a great highlight in my time here was, again, an extraordinary bold move to establish a new campus in Whalley, which, if the downtown east side of Vancouver is the most underprivileged and poorest neighborhood in Canada, Whalley in Surrey was probably next. Again, it was an expression of our concern that we work for the social development and economic development of our host society, but also that we take advantage of the opportunity to build new niche programs, going back to what we've been saying earlier in this program. So the SFU Surrey campus, building on the old Tech BC, has grown from the 200 students who were there when we took over Tech BC to close to 4,000 students now studying at that campus in new programs in exciting areas like interactive arts and technology, or digital entertainment and those kinds of new media and digital entertainment. Mechatronics engineering, specialized branch of engineering, which in effect combines mechanical and software engineering. Programs of that kind that are attracting certainly enrollment from the lower mainland and from the region south of the Fraser River, where access to education was the most difficult in the entire province. So those, I'd say, are the highlights for me.
You didn't specifically mention this, but normally you do, the outstanding architecture we've been the beneficiaries of. And the new Siegel building is just another great example, along with the WASC Center, this Burnaby campus, and then not only the building at Surrey City Centre, but also the interior design of it are all quite remarkable. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time left to talk, but I do know that something new is happening at SFU, and that's some work on the environment. We hardly have a moment to discuss it, but could you just say a word about what's happening with respect to the study of the environment?
I can, absolutely. I mean, we've just gone through, again, and it's typical of SFU, a review of our whole structure and our future strategic planning. And we've created 3 new faculties. One really a reduced form of the existing Faculty of Applied Science, which will now focus exclusively on engineering and computer science. But 2 new faculties. One, Faculty of the Environment and Sustainability, which of course will address the urgent problems now of climate change and the adaptation to climate change, and a whole host of issues that cluster around that problem. And secondly, a Faculty of Communication, Arts and Design, which will group together programs in the Fine Arts, in the School of Contemporary Arts at SFU, in the School of Interactive Arts and Technology, and in the School of Communications. And that, again, of course, is an area of major development in the new economy of Vancouver and the world.
Thank you very much, Michael. We'll be right back.
For more than 40 years, the Faculty of Education at SFU has been delivering academic programs that are innovative and responsive. Based on the academic research of our professors and the expertise of practicing teachers from your communities, our programs are designed to meet classroom needs. As a community, we're piecing together a successful education experience for students today and in the future.
Post-secondary education has been a central issue in British Columbia for at least a decade, as our society tries to determine the goals and levels of funding appropriate for our universities and colleges. Pressure from other sectors have put the squeeze on advanced education funding in recent months, and faculties have expressed their concern about their ability to compete globally given their resources. The manner in which British Columbia pays for and structures its advanced education is a current issue of great importance to the province. There is the danger that cuts in government support may result in a loss of competitive advantage for our leading universities and colleges. Let your opinions be known. Research at universities enables societies and nations to be competitive in a global knowledge economy. It affects both the quality and standards of living. Universities produce new knowledge and ideas through research. Educating students in a research environment with connections on an international scale make universities a major source of highly qualified graduates who are in demand in a global workforce. Thanks for tuning in to Your Education Matters.
For more information about this show, or to view past episodes, go to the Your Education Matters website at www.youreducationmatters.ca. The views and opinions presented in this program are not necessarily those of all faculties, staff, or administration at SFU.